Welcome to Byte-Sized Agency Briefs, a webinar series that packs a ton of important agency information on one topic from one expert into a 25-minute brief. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Thanks for tuning in. This is Byte-Sized Agency Briefs. I'm your host, Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach agency owners to build the agency of their dreams. I'm really excited to be speaking with Nick Deck from Agency Sidekicks. He's a fellow marketing industry veteran, agency owner, and offshore delegation enthusiast with a deep understanding of the intricacies of building a highly profitable, low-stress digital agency and launching side projects such as Agency Sidekicks. So thanks for joining me from your corner of the world, Nick. I appreciate you spending the time with me.
Absolutely, Steve. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be here today.
So we met, I don't remember how, but probably a little over a year ago. I was looking for a VA that could help me with some post-production work, and somebody said, talk to Nick from Agency Sidekicks. And I got hooked up with a really talented, responsive, efficient post-production VA who was able to do graphic design, video editing, things like that. But that's not your core business. So tell me, where you started, how you got here, and what the entrepreneurial brain has led you through a little bit.
Oh boy, I don't know if we want to go that deep into the entrepreneurial brain. That's a scary place. So I started, in terms of entrepreneurship, I started, 12 plus years ago. I had a carpet cleaning company that kicked me off. And that actually is what got me into marketing, because I realized that in order to have a business, you have to be pretty good at marketing. Like if you can't sell whatever you need to sell, nothing else matters. So I took my time, got pretty good at marketing, and one thing led to another, and ended up, 4 or 5 years ago now with my own marketing agency, and took on. I was in way over my head really early on. I took it from 2 to 26 people with a span of about a year. We were taking on massive, 8, 9, 10-figure B2B tech clients. Like we just went, we did not start out with the traditional local businesses, $1,000 a month retainers, that kind of stuff. We got lucky and went right into the deep end. It wasn't it wasn't the smoothest sailing, if I'm completely honest. There's a lot of intricacies in terms of working with that type of clientele that, you learn by doing it. And so that was part of it. But I will say that after having that experience, all of my, subsequent businesses have felt considerably smoother, lighter, easier, lower pressure, that kind of thing. And that's, I don't take any of that for granted. Like I appreciate the fact that there's hardship, and then on the other side of the hardship, you're stronger, bigger, better, faster, strong, that kind of thing. And so I feel like that set me up for success in a lot of what I'm doing today. My primary business is Agency Sidekicks, where we basically focus on helping agency owners and, sales and marketing teams scale, but also not only scale, but take on, reduce a lot of the operational inefficiency and, the profitability issues that a lot of folks face, especially when they're going through early growing seasons. And the way that we do that is by trying to leverage some of their core talent more effectively. Because a lot of times you bring on somebody that's making $50 to $100 a year, somewhere in that range, and they're still doing $8, $10 an hour tasks. And so when you can maximize the bandwidth of this person and then have all the other stuff kind of fall onto the shoulders of folks that are costing you significantly less, then it tends to keep that person's bandwidth fairly well spread out and freed up. And it also helps them keep themselves in areas where they enjoy what they're doing, and they're providing, they're doing the creative, strategic thinking instead of all the kind of grunt work and stuff like that. So that's a big part of what we do today.
So I want to back you up a minute, because you said you grew. So you launched the agency, Heroes of Marketing, you said it was called?
Mm-hmm.
And you worked with big brands from early on, big tickets, but you also said it was lucky. And that's what I tripped up on. because I don't know that I don't not believe in luck, but I also really don't believe in luck too much. So,
Okay.
you pulled away a lot of lessons that you were able to apply to future, you know, business endeavors of what we stumbled over, what happened, but those stumbling blocks, serious lessons there. Like, so what were some of the things that you put in place that allowed you to get those big clients? And then what were some of those lessons that you took away from it?
So I was fortunate enough to work in a similar agency model prior to starting my own. So that was one of the big pieces that when I say that I got lucky, I went from selling my little carpet cleaning company and moving into the marketing
Okay.
space full time as a professional, working with an agency for about four or 5 years there. And they showed me how to do outreach that would get in front of like the CMOs of the world, of the big corporations, that kind of stuff. They showed me how to do service clients in a way, because I was actively fulfilling for that type of client for multiple years. And so managing those client relationships, those engagements was I was one of the team leaders there, and it put me in a position where I had to, it was sink or swim. Like it was like, you're going to take on this big ass client, and if you fail, like that's a 5-figure contract, and you're probably not going to be around for too much longer. So that was where I got a little lucky, because I got originally hired as just like a copywriter, like freelance copywriter, and they just pulled me in real quick and taught me everything I needed to know. And then when I left that agency, I actually had one of the big clients, our biggest client to date, was our first client, and they reached out to me. They said, "Hey, if you're going, I'm going with you." And so we got to start with a 5-figure contract, which was where we got, it certainly wasn't all about luck, but we did get lucky in having that person or that team come along with us, because they stayed with us for years until they got acquired in this big M&A roll up. And so that was a really nice starting point. I got to learn how to do it on somebody else's dime, and then as soon as I started an agency, I got my first 5-figure contract and got to kind of replicate that process over and over.
Gotcha. So luck in the sense that that you had built a relationship and there was an allegiance there from the client. They wanted to come with you. You got the experience. You kind of got to cut your teeth on somebody else's dime at this other company, and they taught you the ways a little bit. The
Mm-hmm.
growth that you experienced, you had to have learned real quick. Dub it as like learning to build and fly the plane while you build it kind of thing. What
Mm-hmm.
you had to put some systems in place, obviously, in order to make that scale work, so you didn't implode. Right? What were some of those lessons that you learned along the way in those first couple of years?
Oh boy. So when I was in the other agency, I had a really strong operations manager and scrum master, and because we were an agile agency, and so they were kind of supporting all of the systems building and things like that. And so I just got to leverage their systems and execute the engagements based on their systems. When I started my own, I realized very quickly, first and foremost, there's another piece of good fortune that kind of fell into my lap. I had some very talented people show me how to do the systems and processes side of things. And so I still to this day utilize some of the tactics and some of the strategies that we used in that agency.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I didn't realize is just how refined these systems need to be. Like, when you can't just copy out a system from this agency and plug it in here and it's going to work perfectly. It needs to be always being iterated, polished, tinkered with, and that based on real world data. Like, you have different clients, you have different team, you have different moving pieces, and so there was that. And then I also realized that even big agencies often are running on much thinner margins than they let on. They've got all these people, they've got all these big contracts, but I think that one of the things that I saw was, like, I was running similar numbers to other agencies I'd been exposed to, and because all of my team was domestic, and because they're all they were all making pretty good money, like, we were making a bunch of cash and we were pouring it right back out. Like, it was just like this big kind of it was this big sad profit and loss statement. Our P&Ls were just like, so here's all this money we're making, and then here's all this money we're spending, and there's this little bit in the middle, then that's for you. And that was one of the hard realizations there. And so that was actually one of the big big incentives, I would say, to go offshore. It's like we saw that there were still really good people like in the team, but they were maxed out in terms of capacity, and they could only take on a certain number of clients. But if we could bring in folks that were making, somewhere between 20 and 50% of what these higher paid folks are making, then we'd be in a position where we could really maximize their capacity and their bandwidth. And that was one of those things that was just like, we had this kind of light bulb moment, and we took a couple months to kind of restructure the team and restructure the org chart and bring people in to just, to take off all of the things that weren't really high leverage activities. And those were, it ended up like one of the things that was immediately obvious was like, oh, we should have done this so much sooner, because there are so many things that can be done by somebody that's making, somewhere between $5 and $15 an hour, for example, versus, $25 to $75 an hour. And that was the hardest lesson I had to learn, because I just the sheer amount that we paid out, but also like one of the most positive lessons I've ever taken away is like, there's so many things, there's so many good people out there that would be stoked to make, 10 to 15 bucks an hour. And they're really, really good at it. And they're highly, hold themselves highly accountable. They're like fairly autonomous when they operate, that kind of stuff. So that was my favorite lesson of the entire experience, I think, because it led to everything we've got going on today.
So systems that not only you just plug and play, but systems that need to be reviewed, refined on a regular basis so that they work for your team. And as your team grows, evolves, changes, shifts, whatever, processes also need to go with them and evolve as well. But then also you found out the benefit of offshoring. Not only do you have access to so many beautiful, talented people, but you can get kind of the 3 or 4 for the price of one kind of thing. What kind of kickback did you get from your internal team on that?
It actually was really positive, because what ended up happening is like we had some lower level players that just didn't need to be there, and they went off and found another place to work. But what we ended up doing was like for the cost of one of those people, we could bring in 3 to support. If somebody was head of content, for example, or head of paid media or something like that, they then had far more people that they could leverage in order to get these client engagements fulfilled. And so it was pretty well accepted. There was a couple things that I experienced where there were communication and cultural barriers and things like that, that it's going to be a part of integrating folks from different places. It is what it is. Different places, different cultures are going to communicate differently, and they're going to have different levels with different ways that they hold themselves accountable, different ways that they and different levels of proactivity and things like that. But what I learned then also was that it wasn't just about finding people that were cost effective. It was about finding people that could, that were really, like in any business, like you need somebody who's just going to be an absolute rock star, and those are the people you hold on to and you nurture those relationships and that kind of thing. It's not just about being cheap. It's like, can they do the job and do the job well and do the job on their own for the most part, and then just seek the guidance of that head of the department versus always being, spoon fed and, being tracked down and like, hey, what are you doing today? And that kind of thing. Like there are going to be people, doesn't matter where they're from, that are just not right for the agency space, because we need to move quickly. We need to trust that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if we can't do that, if there's somebody's job is just to babysit, then it feels like there's those probably aren't good people to have hanging around in your team.
Right. So the initial step was, cool, we've got this team all onshore. We can get rid of some, be more efficient. People that aren't a good match, get rid of them, and replace them with talent offshore. That then evolved into, there's a business model here. There's other agencies that have this need. There's the entrepreneurial spirit saying, let's do something else with this. But that first step, like, what was it like integrating, or I guess I should say expanding culture, right? Because this was pre-pandemic. This was everybody chasing this model now. And so how did you maintain culture from all domestic to now a hybrid onshore, offshore, integrating people, language barriers, things like that, pay disparities even?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So one thing that I've recognized is that there are very few people that you want on your team if they're focused on pay disparities at all. Like if somebody's looking at how well they're compensated and saying, this person earns this much, I earn this much, that's a problem. then that's probably not a good person to have on your team anyways. Like their merit is going to be, or their compensation should be based on the value they provide to the team, period. Like if they provide, if you can do this activity that drives this much revenue for the client or for the customer, for the agency, for example, then they need to be compensated like that. Because these people who are making a third their wage, they can't do this one thing, that kind of thing. So that's something that I've been very clear with my entire team with since the very beginning is you get compensated. It doesn't matter where you live, but you get compensated based on how much value you bring to the table. And like I still have one of my companies is run by somebody who's based in Mexico, who makes more than than some of his American subordinates, because he provides an exceptional level of value. Like he's just stood up, learned a lot, and taken on everything, and he basically runs the company. And he has folks from the U.S. who are his, who he tells what to do, basically. So it's all about, can they do it? Can they do the job? And can they do the job better than anybody else on the team?
Right.
I don't know if that's the whole bit.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's awesome. What about as far as like extending culture and kind of integrating, capturing all that now as a hybrid team?
I think that one of the things that I have been good at, just as an innate superpower, is bringing people together and establishing really strong communication systems. So regular huddles where they get to see each other face to face, and it's not always work. Like if you get to intro, like have the first few minutes of the huddles be, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? Tell me about what you did on the weekend, that kind of stuff. So people get to actually establish a bit of rapport. That's always been really helpful. And also assigning direct reports, having an infrastructure in the company that is like, this person reports to this person. So it's not like this person supports all of these other people and they might just go to them with one-off tasks, that kind of thing. But having direct relationships between managers or leaders and their subordinates, I think that tends to be something where naturally the evolution is going to be that these people learn to work together more closely and intimately and anticipate one another's needs and that kind of thing, versus like just like having one of the reasons that I like the way that we've done things is like the Upwork model is really challenging when you've got somebody who's like, okay, here's my core team. These are the people that do most things. And then we'll just throw some projects out to a VA every once in a while. We'll give them like 5 hours a month. And it's like, they don't have a relationship there. There's no accountability. There's no they don't care whether or not your company succeeds. It's like they're a contractor way out on the outside. So I try to build people into as a member of the team as much as possible, because once they have that identity as I'm part of the company, I'm a piece of something bigger than myself. It's not just like I'm here to do a job. I'm here to just get shit done. Like, I'm sorry if I'm not supposed to curse on here, but like once they can move past being a subcontractor or being an outsider, they integrate into the team. That's something where they naturally typically move towards taking on more responsibility and providing more proactive value versus just being told what to do and that kind of thing. So that's one of them. But yeah, I personally really like having some sort of operations focused role within the company. That's one of my favorites, just having a project manager or an operations manager that keeps everybody, like their job is to keep the team integrated. And it's not just like, hey, did you do this task? But it's like, hey, this person's having trouble with this task. Let me get you guys on a call really quick so that you can address the issues that this person's having, or something like that. Like bringing them together. That's one of the things. So that I've either tried to have somebody in place to do that at all times, or been the person myself. So like if I hear an issue and there's somebody on the problem that can help them solve it, I get them on a call and they just work through it together. And like just like prioritizing that time tends to work out really. There's nobody likes having more calls, but when you can invest in like solution-oriented communication early on, then it tends to be something where the payoff long-term, the ROI long-term, everything that I do, I try to think of it long-term. It's not like, bring that person in, give them what they need as much as possible, as soon as possible, because then they're better set up for success and they're probably not going to need as much of it longer down the road.
So that evolved into agency Sidekicks. So now you're running two businesses. You've got the agency going. You've now got this outsourced model where you're both bringing on people that have talent and looking for agencies. So your business development on both sides. How are you running both of these shops?
It's a really good question, because that's actually one of the things I didn't anticipate before I got into this. It was kind of funny, because what ended up happening is we had reached out and used a bunch of like staffing agencies, and the kind of traditional recruitment model was letting us down in our agency. So we got really good at recruiting internally. And then we got into this, what ended up happening, we had folks come to us and they said, hey, I saw what you did for your company. Can you do that to us? It was just, people in our network, other agency partners and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, yeah, I guess so. And so it kind of like, we started, but like the first 6 months to a year was probably mostly just like helping other people around us do the same thing. It wasn't a formal business model yet. But once we got into, working with new clients and things like that, we realized that we had two problems. There's always the business development, like you said, on the front end of any business, but then there's the actual talent acquisition and like the recruitment model. That was something that was new to us, because we could recruit, for our own agency fairly well, but recruiting at scale was something that was different. So it's almost like a marketing engine, in terms of just like we use, outbound messaging on LinkedIn and things like that. We run ads, we do all sorts of stuff, and it was a interesting problem to solve for. But the funny thing about it was that with recruitment, it ended up being just marketing, like sales and marketing for people. And so what I mean by that is like, we'll reach out on LinkedIn and we'll set up an interview or set up an appointment. We'll have the sales call, or we'll have the interview. Same thing. Or like we'll run an ad for a role, and we'll schedule an appointment, which is the sales call. And it's the same exact thing. And that, but it tends to be easier to recruit people in general. They get people on the call. Like there's a lot more people that want the job. The other part was just like having technically skilled people that also had the emotional intelligence to identify whether or not folks are going to be good in terms of like personality and culture fit. That was a big challenge that we had to address. We solved for that later, because we ended up having issues where like someone was a fantastic human but didn't have the technical skill set, or someone had the technical skill set but they weren't that great of a human being. And so we ended up having to figure out how to get both in one person. And that was an interesting dilemma. But yeah, it was, it's all part of entrepreneurship. It's all part of building the business, right? It's like you encounter a challenge and you address the challenges as they come. It's like, I think I saw a Hermosi piece the other day where there was just basically like, that is entrepreneurship, just one challenge after the next, and you just grow based on how many challenges you can overcome, So it just is what it is. But I appreciate the fact that at least now I can anticipate that. Like there's never going to be a day where we're just like smooth sailing, we're done. It's just part of the game, we're all playing it.
Yeah. So are you also coaching agencies on how to have that deeper emotional intelligence, or how to better onboard, or how to better cultivate culture? Or are you like, is that part of what you're doing with Agency Sidekicks, or is it strictly here's a designer, here's an editor, here's a copywriter, here's a PPC person? Like what agency side things are you guys providing?
It's a really good question. So I think that one of the benefits that we bring to the table is the fact that we do go above and beyond for like folks in the agency space. It's not just like, here's a person, good luck. We try to integrate them into the team as effectively as possible. And what that looks like is we just have a lot of different data points to be able to say, hey, this person, like, here are the weak points in your operations. Like, here's what we can do to address those things. And so like we do, our sales call is just really just figuring out what you need. And then we go and put together, 3 to 5 candidates and say, here's some folks, interview them. When somebody says, okay, look, I'd like to work with this person, that's just when we get started. So we'll jump on a kickoff call, we'll get access to accounts, we'll set goals, we'll make sure that we have an ideal target for all to be pointed towards. But we also, like that first month at minimum, we're going to meet on a weekly basis. We're going to identify any obstacles that are coming up. And then that person is on our team is going to bring it back to the collective team, and we're going to either come up with a training plan, or we've got SOPs that are in place. We've got all these different things so that we can help our clients better leverage the talent. It's not just like, hey, you're onboarded now, go have fun, and we'll talk to you never. It's more of an ongoing managed service where we're constantly evaluating the performance of the talent, but we're also constantly evaluating the feedback of the of the client themselves. So like in a situation where somebody says, hey, I've got I've got them doing all the things I originally intended for them to do, but now we want them to take on this new responsibility. I don't know how to delegate it to them. We jump on a call and we just map out the moving pieces. We say, here are the 7 steps for that thing. Your sidekick's going to be responsible for 3, 5, and 7. And, this is going to go to somebody. Like, we try to help them figure out what needs to be put in place, how they need to hold that person accountable, who else on the team is going to be working on this. There's a lot of different levels of support that we provide there. Fortunately, we can kind of, in our early discussions, we can typically identify, like, okay, so this is the newer agency. They're going to need a lot more hand-holding. We'll schedule more calls more frequently for a longer duration. Or if there's somebody that comes to us and like, look, been there, done this, you guys, I got this. I just need your help saving me time finding a really good person. Then we're like, cool, we'll just get you that one. But it's there for if they want it. They also have access to, like, we have a bunch of tools that we pay for the enterprise subscriptions to. We give access to all the sidekicks, so they don't have to buy new tools. There's a bunch of SOPs. There's a bunch of different little odds and ends that we kind of build into the offering to make sure that it's, just that they get more out of it than just a person,
Yeah, love it. And I can personally vouch for the talent that I've had access to through you and your team. They've been exceptional, proactive, creative, smart, enthusiastic. I love it. So I want to jump gears real quick. Actually, I got a couple of quick rapid fire questions not related to agency sidekicks. So the first is, what was a lesson that you pulled out of 22 that you're bringing into 2023 to shift up the way that you do things?
Relationships are probably one of the most powerful assets that you can develop, and it's not something that you can do it's not a matter of just developing a process that, like, somebody's building relationships for your company. You got to go do that. And what I mean by that is, like, I've had, we've done fairly well on our own. When I say on my own, I mean, I've got a fantastic team, but, like, not having a bunch of referral partners and things like that, and people that, introduce new opportunities to us. But in the last year, I've really made room in my calendar and room in my, mental bandwidth for going out and building relationships with people. And I've had more just fantastic opportunities present themselves, like private equity introductions and things like, like taking sidekicks, for example, where we're doing 1, 2, 5, 6, 5 or 6 sidekicks, like something like that. And they're like, hey, we need to build out a team of 20 or 100 or something like that. Like, that's what's coming down the pipeline for us. Or for the agency, we've got similar opportunities. So I would say that just investing some of your time in building authentic relationships where you provide value first to people, and then letting that be how you showcase your expertise. That's been something that has been really fantastic, because I can't tell you how many cool things have been opened up for me, how many cool doors and opportunities have been opened up in the last year, just because of the people that I've met and know and have been introduced to, and it just continues to impress me.
Nick, I really appreciate your time. I love what you're doing with Agency Sidekicks. If anybody's interested in checking them out and learning more, I'll drop the links in the info below with the podcast. Nick from Agency Sidekicks, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Steve. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, man.
Thanks again for tuning in to Byte-Sized Agency Briefs. As always, if you found value in this episode, chances are someone else will too, so please share it with your network. Also, if you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love, drop me a note. Let's get them on. Finally, find someone to hug today.